So we can look at the domain and range of the radical function through the perspective of a transformation. So we can graph this function, and we know that this is a horizontal shift to the left. There's no vertical horizontal flips, so we know the domain must be going to the right. So from -3, x is going to be greater than or equal to -3. And same thing with the range. We can say that the range has no change, so the range is going to be 0, greater than or equal to 0. So this can be done through the transformation perspective. We could also think of this from the function that we can't square root negatives, and we know that we can't go any smaller than -3. So what does the radical do as a transformation though? So before we were just kind of analyzing radical functions, but what does the radical do as a transformation? Okay, so we're going to look at the radical as a transformation now. So to do that, we can take a look at the original function f of x as a linear function, and I'm going to draw this as a linear function. It's got a slope of 1 and a y-intercept of 3. Okay, so what happens when we apply a square root on the outside of that linear function? So as we do the square root on the outside of that linear function, what's going to happen is we're going to have this graph here. Okay, it's going to start at -3. That's where the x-intercept is. And it's going to kind of go like that. Okay, so this, I'm going to draw this a little bit bigger so that we can see a little bit more detail here. So I'm going to draw my x-intercepts a little bit further up. Maybe like that. Okay, and my graph then, it's going to start at that x-intercept. It's going to go up, and it's going to go like that. And so what ends up happening is the radical function is going to get rid of this negative part. Okay, so that negative part now disappears. Okay, and the reason is the radical has a restriction. We cannot square root any negative numbers. So this part of the graph, original x plus 3 graph, that linear function, disappears. What also happens then is that the y values of that x plus 3 get bent down because they get square rooted. The y values being square rooted get bent down. So two things happen. Okay? When we talk about square root as a transformation, okay, two things happen. First of all, the negatives disappear. So the negatives disappear. Okay, and the reason why is because we cannot square root negatives. Secondly, the second thing that happens is the square root bends the graph down. Bends the graph to the x-axis. Okay, so those two things are the ways we relate what's happening with square root as a transformation.